You can choose to live your life constantly looking at scary ideas and scary situations that don't even exist yet and may never exist. And just think about how much anxiety you're creating in your life and living through that is not necessary.
Welcome to the final episode of Menopause and the Anxious Brain. I'm your host, Holly Osterman. Last time, we explored how our thoughts and imagination can fuel our anxiety, and we discovered strategies for changing the channel to find greater peace. If you missed it, I'd highly recommend checking out episode 2 before you watch today. Today, we're diving into the heart of worry. Our guest, Catherine Pittman, Ph.D., will share her expertise on how to identify and overcome the worry trap. As always, remember that while the information in this series is incredibly valuable, it is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Be sure to consult your healthcare provider to discuss your unique symptoms and treatment options. If you're ready to take the final step in transforming your relationship with anxiety, you're in the right place. Let's join Catherine for one last transformative conversation. Welcome to Real Wisdom today. I'm so excited to have you back to talk about worry. But before we get to that part, Catherine, let's just go over what we talked about in the first 2 episodes.
A little bit. We really should do that because, people have not been thinking about this every moment since we last discussed it. I think
Right. We covered a lot of
yeah,
ground.
I think the most important thing we talked about was introducing the amygdala, and so important to understand this little tiny part of us. Actually, remember, two parts, two different amygdalas, but when we talk about the amygdala, we are talking about the part that creates our stress feelings, our fear, our anxiety, the physical aspects of that, like your heart pounding, your mouth getting dry, all of that, the amygdala is creating. And one of the important things, once you realize that, and you realize that the amygdala creates it and that it sees things before you do, and it hears things before you do, and it can create these reactions before you even really have processed in your cortex what you're seeing or hearing. Once you know that, then first of all, you have to remember that the amygdala can be wrong about things, that it can produce a feeling that's very real, that is absolutely real and could be measured, your heart rate and your blood pressure, and even things happening in your muscles and your stomach, all these changes happening that are very real, but it could be completely wrong. We talked about the idea that there could be a little swirl of hair in your shower and you could jump out of that bathtub because the amygdala saw what looked close to like a spider. And it can cause you to react, cause you to feel all kinds of things. But the important thing is to remember we know where those feelings are coming from, and they're not always correct. We can feel very real fear when there's no reason to be afraid, like, a little bunch of hair, nothing to fear. And that's just very true. So, understanding that the part of our brain that creates that reaction in us, the feeling of anxiety that feels awful and that is real, that part is capable of being wrong and we can't control it. It's going to react sometimes, whether we want it to or not. And that means that sometimes you just have to sit with it and feel this feeling, but say, yeah, my amygdala is not liking this situation. But is my amygdala right? Not always. My amygdala's been wrong before. How many times have we felt afraid to approach a situation and it turned out fine? And once we put all this neurological information in and knowledge together with some of our experiences, we start to see that we can't always trust our feelings of anxiety and stress to be an indication that there is a real danger. I'm not saying that there aren't stresses in our lives, but the feelings that we're having, we too often think this means everything's going to just go to hell or something awful is going to happen or something awful has happened. And that's just not true. So we need to remember this amygdala, and we talked about some ways to calm it down, exercise and getting better sleep and breathing, different things we can do that actually target that part in our brain. And then we also said that sometimes the amygdala is not at all worried about a situation and is not activating and is not producing the stress or anxiety response. And we can think thoughts in our cortex, our thinking brain. We can imagine situations that when the amygdala becomes aware of those situations, just in our brain, they're not really happening, but they're just in our cortex. The amygdala can react to those thoughts or images. One of the things we've said is the amygdala watches cortex television. So just like you can get scared by watching a television show, even though you know it's not real sometimes, your amygdala does the same thing. And in fact, we don't know that there's any way the amygdala can tell the difference between you thinking and you having actual evidence. So if you're just imagining it, that can activate the amygdala. If you're just imagining one of your children has been hurt in an accident, that can activate the amygdala, and we feel feelings. And then once you feel those feelings, it makes you more concerned about that idea.
Right. So that's when we have to change the
That's
channel.
we have to change the channel. And of course, every ounce of your being may be saying, I can't think about other things that would be terrible. I don't know that my daughter's safe. Well, you don't know that she's not safe. And so are you
Right.
going to just soak in these feelings, or are you going to try to change the channel, call a friend and talk about what happened with their graduation party over the weekend, or sit down and make out your grocery list and try to get your mind off it. And then when your daughter shows up coming through the door and she's perfectly fine, then you won't have spent the last half an hour in just dread.
And then is that where we get to?
Yeah, now that's when we get to part 3 and we talk about worry. Now, sometimes people think worry is a feeling, and we have to kind of back away from that because worry is not the feeling. Worry refers to the thoughts. So we have to kind of separate thoughts and feelings. Thoughts are when you're having an idea about something, and it could be something you can translate into words. It could be an image that's in your mind. So worry refers to thoughts. And when we talk about thoughts, we're saying what is going on in our cortex, the things that sometimes they're words we hear ourselves saying, like, I'm never going to be able to handle this, is going to be a disaster. But sometimes we don't necessarily hear it. We're just thinking to ourselves, she's angry at me. We just have that thought. We look at someone and we have an idea about something. And it has to do with saying to ourselves something about what's going to happen as an outcome in the future. So, for example, if you look at your friend's face and you think she looks like she's angry, and you think back about what you said, and then you think you offended her, and then you think she's going to give you a lecture in the future, or maybe she won't go with you on the next event that you plan together because she's irritated with you, you are having worries. A worry is your brain generating negative outcomes about a particular situation. And we can worry about hundreds of situations, as you probably know. And the more of an imagination you have, and sometimes the smarter you are, the more you are able to come up with things to worry about and to use your imagination for imagining all kinds of terrible, horrific things happening, different ways things could go wrong. But it's definitely a thinking process. In fact, we even know where it is. You know where it is? It's right here in your left frontal area we have worry circuits where we're able to identify that is the part of the brain that's working hard at generating thoughts that have to do with anticipating outcomes and thinking about it. And worry is about negative outcomes. We're not thinking all's well, all will be well. Worry is about thinking about what else could go wrong, what could possibly happen. And that's what worrying is about, thoughts. Now, people will say, well, when I worry, I feel stuff. And I would tell you, let's go back to what we've learned. So when you're thinking those thoughts, whatever it is, that your presentation at work is going to be ridiculed by some of your coworkers, and you're imagining that happening, or you're thinking about certain people and the kind of things you've heard them say in the past and how that would apply to this current situation while you're doing that. That is a worry. And while you're doing those kind of thoughts, your amygdala is watching what is happening in your cortex and is very aware of those thoughts or images that you're playing there. That you are running through the loop, that what channel you've tuned into.
Well, sometimes it feels your worries seem almost silly because right now, if I wanted to really think about it, I could be worrying because it looks like it's going to start raining. And did I clean the gutters out? Is there gonna leak into the basement?
Mhm.
All of these.
Yeah.
Will I hear the tornado sirens because I'm down in the basement already? You just get caught up in that little, like you said, a little loop of story you're telling yourself.
Right. And then as you start generating emotions from your amygdala watching that, because what you've done is you've basically shown the amygdala a scary movie, and then the amygdala gets all worked up and activated. Once that happens, then these thoughts and concerns seem even more important because now you've got this reaction and emotions going on in your body, and you're feeling your mouth might go dry, you might feel kind of nauseous. All kinds of things can start occurring. And this is definitely real. You're not imagining it. And it's the amygdala preparing you for danger. It's that defense response happening. And it feels terrible. It's a terrible feeling. And you wouldn't be having it if you weren't focusing on those particular thoughts. Have you ever noticed that when you're really busy and you're running around doing a lot of different things and you don't have time to kind of reflect or imagine or think much, you're just busy? You ever notice you don't feel as stressed sometimes?
Correct,
And
right.
it's often because we are not worrying very much. And so, therefore, we're not activating that amygdala. We're too busy to worry. So, we don't worry. And then we're just busy doing. And the amygdala, not seeing anything scary, is going to be able to just go on with things, not activate.
Is that why sometimes the worry seems worse when we get in bed at
Oh,
night because we're done for the
mhm.
day? So there isn't a lot to keep us busy because we're trying to shut it down and go sleep.
And we're just trying to relax and empty our minds. But you know what? You can't, you don't empty your mind. You can't turn off your brain like a television set. And so when people try to just think of nothing, things just pop up. And the things that pop up are often things that we've been trying not to think about, or things that occur to us suddenly, and we continue to kind of build on those thoughts. And so you can find yourself going into a little worry session when you lie down. That's why it's so helpful very often for people who have brains like that to listen to something, a bedtime story, a podcast, something like that. But a positive, don't listen to scary things. You're putting your amygdala back on it. If you start listening to something about the number of break-ins in people's neighborhoods or something, that's not a good thing to fall asleep to.
No.
So I was just listening to a podcast on cat language. I guess cats don't talk to each other as much as they talk to people. And just things like that are just like they keep my attention from going to scary thoughts. All right. So let's say, though, I want to tell you that there is a reason I believe we worry. And when you think back on it, it must be serving a good purpose. So if I tell you to stop worrying, some of you may object. No, worrying helps me. My students say this all the time. They'll say, if I didn't worry, I wouldn't be studying. And I say, so you think the worrying helps you to study? I don't know if that's always true, because sometimes worrying interferes with studying because it keeps your mind on your fears and you can't focus on studying. So I don't think it's a worry. I think it's the studying helps, but I don't know that you had to worry to study. But I can understand that they think there must be something good about worry, or it wouldn't have developed in the human brain. And I agree. But here's what I say we have to use worry in the correct way, not in an incorrect way. And so, what we're talking about today, now that we've done our little review and introduced worry, we're going to talk about how it is that we think it's beneficial. Go back to our prehistoric ancestors and think about people just building their little huts and learning to maybe to grow some plants, or maybe just what plants help you with different things, what settles your stomach or what. And so they're doing things and setting up their lives in certain ways. So let's say there's a woman we can think about, and you know what she's done? She has built herself a nice hut. And you know what she did? She built her little hut pretty close to this little stream because she has some kids and they get dirty. And she thought, this is good because I can kind of dunk them in the water, wash them. I can get water to my little hut easily. And also, there's some fish and also crayfish in this little stream. So I've got food here, I've got water, I've got, it's a good place to have my hut. So she's thinking that. And that's good. And it shows you that woman has the ability to plan things and think about things, right? So that's great. And the planning circuits are also right up in the frontal lobes of our brain, by the way. They're up there too. Okay. So let's say one day this woman is one of the first women in the world. And I say, it developed in women first. I bet it did. I bet women develop worry because we're so good at it. So though this woman developed the ability to worry. What that means is she was able to think of negative outcomes. And the beautiful thing is you can think of a negative outcome you've never seen in your life. You can imagine something completely unimagined before. You just imagine it now. So here's what this woman does. One day it's raining and she's seeing that little stream get higher and higher. And she imagines the stream getting so high that it swallows up her little hut there. And then she imagines something she's never seen, her kids and the hut floating down the stream and being washed away. And that's a terrifying image. And that activates her amygdala. And that captures her attention, that idea, because it activated her amygdala, which I think is a good thing. But if she just sat there and didn't do anything, here's what she does. She moves from the worrying to planning. She moves to using a different part of her brain. Instead of thinking, let's imagine more what could happen. Let's imagine how much food gets washed away. Let's imagine, which of my children is most likely to drown. Let's stop. Get the idea. Danger. Okay? Let's switch. Is there a plan that can help me deal with this worry? I don't know that she asked herself that question, but you could see this woman was a planner. So she had built a hut. So she thinks to herself, I can move this hut. I can take it apart. I can build a new one. I don't need my hut to be this close to the stream. I could put it over there, up high over there, where I don't think the water would ever get up to it. And if she does that, I bet she and her children live longer than people who don't have worry circuitry.
Yeah, that would make sense because she's aware of her surroundings. She is anticipating things that haven't happened, but she needs to protect her family. She needs to be the one in charge.
Right.
So the plan is a great
Right.
thing.
So here's the thing. Did worry save her?
Yes, but only
Because she did
because she
plan.
planned.
Right. So in and of itself, worry isn't the answer. Worry is a step. But if you get stuck in worry, and I'm not going to suggest you, Holly, would get stuck in
No.
worry. No, never, never. But if you don't know, and by the way, here's what I always say. You weren't given an instruction manual to your brain. So you didn't know when you worry, that is a sign that you should engage your planning circuits. I mean, no one tells you that. But there's some things some people have told us, like my mom saying that worry is like a rocking chair, keeps you busy, but you don't go anywhere, So,
Oh, I like that one.
so it makes you think worry in and of itself doesn't accomplish a lot. But if you think to yourself, okay, I have a worry, and you have a worry, and that worry is only going to be helpful if, like this prehistoric woman, you let go of the worry for enough time to think about what could I do to prevent this problem? What can I do to deal with this problem? Make a plan. So it's really essential that you move away from worry to a plan, right? And then come up with a plan like she did. So whatever you're worrying about, you have to think to yourself, first of all, is this something that's really likely to happen? And if I really am worried that this is a real possibility. Now, if I'm just imagining things and I'm like, come on, this is ridiculous. I'm scaring myself and this is never going to happen. Sometimes you think things like you have no indication that there's any problem in your pregnancy, but you're thinking you're going to lose your baby. You might just say, the
Because you
doctor,
saw
I,
in a news article
yeah,
or
you saw a news article. Exactly. And then you Googled things and then you got yourself all worried more, right? Yeah. And Googling is one of the one of the things that most enhances our ability to worry. So we have really created a monster in our brain. In fact, I don't know any time that you have a worry about having a certain medical condition that Googling doesn't make your worry worse. I feel like it
oh yes.
always does. It always makes it. So, anyway, bottom line here, bottom line, the correct use of worry is to move from worrying to getting yourself to make a plan. And then when you make that plan, you're going to have that plan. And one thing you might do, like this woman did, she just said, I'm going to move my hut or I'm going to build a new hut, right? Whatever she's going to do is she's going to change things. But sometimes you're not sure. Like, for example, I'm thinking about, let's say you have a friend and she gives you that weird look when you're talking and you think you've offended her and you keep thinking about what you said over and you keep thinking that she's angry at you and this is going to really threaten your friendship. So you have to move to a plan. So your plan might be this. When I get together with her at the next book club, I'm going to see if she seems awkward still. And if she seems like normal, my plan is don't worry about it. But if she still seems a little standoffish at the book club, then after that book club, I'm going to take her aside and say, I'm worried I offended you. Now, notice this. Your plan might be to talk to her, but notice you're not executing the plan. You're saying, I'm going to hold it in case I need it. Like if you're worried you're going to come up short because you have a car repair, but you don't know how much the car repair is going to be. So you're thinking, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent, but you don't know for sure because you don't know how much. You might say, if I can't pay my rent, I could talk to my brother and borrow some money because he's doing well. He'll loan me some money. But you don't run to your brother right away. You just have the plan in case it's needed. And all of us know how many times we've had worries that never really came true. So we didn't need the plan. But you know why we need the plan? We need the plan in case, but also so that we can do the next step, which is to move on with our day. So what I've done with my clients is I've drawn out a little diagram. And this little diagram is just to write down the word worry and then have an arrow that points to the next word, which is plan, and then an arrow that moves away from plan. Go on with your day now, right? And what we've done is we want to share those images with people. So we're going to do that. And so the correct use of worry is this worry arrow, plan arrow, which means the steps you're supposed to do. My clients tell me it's really simple, but it helps them remember this. Okay, I'm worrying. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to move to a plan. Okay, I need to make a plan. It may be a plan I execute, right? It may be a plan I don't execute. I just hold on to it in case I need it. Then there's another arrow. What's that other arrow mean? Oh, it means move on with my day. It means go back to things you need to do, right?
love the move
Move
on
on.
with the day part because I hear from so many women that's where they get stuck. They're not moving on.
Yeah, because you know what? Sometimes what people do is some people say, I do come up with plans. And then you say, then why are you stuck in worry? And they're like, no one told me to move on. I went back to worry. And it's wait, worry has done its purpose. Worry has alerted you to a potential problem so that you could plan for it. But worry is not intended for you to sit in it and soak in it like a hot tub, you know? No, that's not necessary. And why don't we want to soak into it? And may I mention our little friend, the amygdala, who will then think we have a danger, even though the worry hasn't happened and may never happen. And so we will be raising our stress level and continuing our stress unnecessarily. So that is the proper use of worry, right? And there's a couple ways, and these are also in our little illustration. There are a couple ways that we fail. One way is what we said.
Can I just ask one
Yo, yeah,
question?
go ahead.
Because you had said it briefly before, and I'm sure you could relate when someone tells you, oh, just quit worrying about it, as if it were that easy to do.
No, it is not.
And then that just irritates you.
And you know why it's not easy? Because when you think to yourself, stop worrying, it's like if I tell you, stop thinking about pink elephants, you're like, Catherine, I wasn't even thinking about pink elephants, but now you keep telling me to stop thinking about pink elephants. They keep popping into my head. Same thing if you tell yourself not to worry. Remember our rule? We said you can't erase and you can't turn
You
off.
must
You must
replace.
replace, right? So notice how we're replacing worrying with plan. And then we're replacing plan. We're not sticking even with the plan. I mean, you could write it down if you felt like you really needed to have it detailed to yourself. You could write it down, but you need to move on from it. What are we replacing it with? And this is the thing. I say anything you want. Could be making dinner, could be going to a movie, could be calling a friend, could be reading a book, could be whatever. But
Could be that walk around the
walk
block,
around
the
the block,
exercise
walk
part.
around. Yeah, there's all kinds. It's just like there's so many things. How many channels do you think you have in your brain? My
Endless.
gosh. Yes. And you're just trying to get on a channel that's not going to activate your amygdala. Some people will say, what about if there is a flaw in the plan? Like, what if you think something could go wrong with the plan? Then I say, okay, you know what that is. When you think of a negative outcome of your plan, that's a worry. So what do we do with a worry? We come up with a plan to deal with the flaw or the worry we have about our plan, right? But you still have to move on from the plan. If you find yourself keep looping around, going from plan to back to worry, plan, back to worry, plan, back to worry, that is not coming up with a plan and moving on. That is just going back to worry. Notice it does not say come up with a perfect plan. You don't need a perfect plan. In fact, like 70% of the time, you don't even need the plan because your worry is just a worry, right? So, so the main thing is when you are making a plan, when you're done, don't go back to worrying, move on, replace worrying and the plan both with other thoughts. And you have to give yourself permission to do that. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes if I really have trouble, honestly, I'll grab my phone and I'll play a game of solitaire. Because if I can just focus myself on trying to do that quickly, I'm never as quick as my wife is. She can do it in like under 3 minutes. And I'm trying to beat her time and I'm focused. And it gets me off. You know what's the wonderful thing about the human brain? Even though it can do 1,000, maybe even 1,000,000 things at one time, when it comes to focus, it's limited. It can only focus on one thing at a time, which is why we can't text and drive because it's not safe because you can't text and be safe driving and you can't be driving and see what the heck you're doing with your texting. It's just not possible. But it's a benefit because it tells us you are only fighting over a little small piece of real estate in your brain. It's not like it's huge. It's just what are you going to focus on? And you say, well, I am going to focus on the solitaire game and I'm going to see if I can beat 3 minutes. That's what I'm going to do. And sometimes that's enough to kind of get your brain disengaged from that being stuck. The key thing here is when you make the plan, you have to move on. You do not go back to worry. Worry has served its purpose. That is not the way to do it. And that's why on our little diagram, we say, don't go back to worry. And that's a bad approach. But like I said, if you've been doing that, I don't blame you because no one told you not to. Seemed like reasonable. But there's another thing that some people do. Some people just stay in worry and never think to leave worry at all. They just continue to focus on that and focus on that. And some people believe that worry keeps things from happening. For example, I've had clients say to me, I have worried and worried about my grades and all that worrying I've done. And do you know, I've never gotten anything less than a B. And I say, so you're telling me that you believe it was your worrying that kept you from getting a poor grade? Because I suspect there was some reading, studying, writing papers, all these different things that got you those good grades. And you think it was worrying. And I say, what about if you wasted all that time worrying because you didn't even need to? Sounds like a lot. You've never even gotten a B minus? You've never gotten a straight B and you're worrying. See? So you can say, okay, worrying could be a waste of my time. You could do a lot more of other things in your life. But the bottom line is a lot of times people don't want to stop worrying. They're afraid to. They say, I've worried about my kids all these years and nothing bad has really ever happened to them. So I said, so you think worrying is some kind of magical thing that if you worry, the thing you do in your head, if you worry, it's going to keep bad things from happening. Like if the things I did in my head helped me, I would just think I win the lottery and boom, I would win the lottery. But the things that happen in my head often have nothing to do with what actually happens. And if people are honest with me, they usually agree that they do a lot more worry than they encounter the bad things they worry about. So they are definitely worrying about more things than ever happen. And that means suffering. That means anxiety. That means stress.
So is that the explanation? If you're stuck in that little pity party, that little pool of worry.
What if this? And what if that? You're just playing the what if game. What if this happened? What if that happened? What if this is why he's not home yet? What if this is why he's not home? What could be this? He could be dead. I don't know what he's doing, but all these bad ideas about why, your partner isn't home and it's just, and meanwhile you're suffering.
And that's making your anxiety and all these other feelings that you have 10 times worse.
And you're having feelings you wouldn't be having if you kept off the worry channel. Don't tune into that channel. If you do catch yourself tuning into it, then say the right way to use this is if I think this is a legitimate thing that could happen. I could not be able to pay my mortgage. It really could happen that my daughter has been in an accident. What should I do? And so you think about what would be the plan.
And is that plan the thing that's going to help pull you out of this bad spot
Well,
that you're
very
in?
often it does. I had a client one time I was sitting down with, and she was really worried that she was pregnant, and she was not married and college student. She was really worried what that would do to her life, and she couldn't let go of the worry. So I said, let's do the plan approach then. I couldn't convince her to just let go of it. It seemed too possible to her. So we went and we really made a plan. I said, okay, let's imagine you're pregnant. Okay, what are you going to do? And so she kind of talked her way through the whole thing. She said, if I'm pregnant, I would really want to have the baby, but I don't think I can handle that. So I would probably have to give the baby up for adoption. She thought her way through it. I said, so that's your plan. I repeated it back to her. We kind of went through it and her rationale. And I said, okay, now you know what you want to do. So now we know what you're going to do. So can you kind of start to go back to studying and hanging out with your friends and not just being so all caught up in all this stress and anxiety? She said, actually, I can. I know what I'm going to do. That's what I'll do if it is. And it gave her peace of mind to have that plan. And I think it does many times. Many times it's not going to be necessary, but sometimes you really do need to face whatever it is that you're worried about and have a plan for it, and then know you're ready if it does happen. And then you can say, okay, now I can go back to work in the garden. Now I can figure out what I want to do this weekend. You got to move on with that plan, move on and do your day and just let yourself know, I got my plan. I got my plan. If you find worries coming up,
Is there anything? I mean, I completely get what you're saying, but is there anything after the plan to help you not go back to that
well,
worry?
my clients come up with different things. Some people say, I leave the worry there, but I pull a curtain in my mind. And I don't know why that helped, but that helped somebody. And some people say writing down the plan helps them because they feel like I need to keep thinking about it or I'll forget it, or I need to keep thinking about the worry or I won't think of. But to just know that you have a part of your brain called the amygdala, and you can choose to live your life constantly looking at scary ideas and scary situations that don't even exist yet and may never exist. And just think about how much anxiety you're creating in your life and living through that is not necessary. And you only understand this if you really kind of understand how your brain works. If you understand there's a part in the brain that creates stress, and it's very cautious. If there's any sign of danger, a stick that looks like a snake, it's going to create a feeling of fear. It is very protective of you. And so if you know that, then you could say, I am not going to be showing scary movies to this part of my brain because I'm the one that suffers. It is really stressful. And it's a new approach, so it takes a little while, but you start to discover that you really feel like you can get through your life better if you don't wear yourself out with all the stress that worrying brings when you're not using it the way it's helpful. You can use it in a helpful way or you can use it in an unhelpful way.
Well, I know that the way I originally found you, and we haven't talked too much about that, was through your book. And I know that the intention behind the book wasn't for a 55-year-old woman in menopause. But if this woman finds, reads your book, what next steps would you give her if she's really struggling with anxiety and fear and stress?
Well, one thing I just think it really helps people to be introduced to the amygdala and to say there's a part of your brain that creates stress. And it's like the little ignition switch that starts a car, right? It causes all these changes in that car, things turning, things burning, things going. And when you know that this, you can break it down to the processes. That if I say, and guess what? When we go through menopause, the hormones that are in our body that are getting out, changing balance, guess what? They affect the amygdala, right? The amygdala is really responsive to changes in levels of estrogen, for example. And so just like we go through before we hit menopause and we're going through menstrual cycles every month and there's these hormone shifts, you might notice you're a different person, right?
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. So we are chemical on one level. And if I say this part of your brain is going to be more susceptible to stress, and this might be the time of your life when up till now, stress has been manageable. But right now, you might need a little more help in managing that stress, like knowing what part of your brain it comes from and what part of your brain you can control and what parts you can't, and how you can kind of work with this process that goes on in your brain of how your thoughts can activate fear and anxiety when there's no good reason. And when you realize that, you kind of say, I have control over my thoughts. I may not be able to turn my amygdala down directly by saying, calm down, amygdala. That doesn't do anything. But I may be able to prevent my amygdala from seeing things that scare it so often. And that's what worry is about. Basically, showing scary movies to your amygdala and knowing that, especially if you are a very creative, imaginative, and smart person, you are probably very excellent at creating nice movies for the amygdala to get scared. Sometimes people who aren't very imaginative, it's amazing how calm they can stay because they're like, what? I never would have thought of that. Wow. You have to be kind of creative and imaginative and smart sometimes to really know how to scare yourself real good.
Yes. Yeah. And I think for this stage in a lot of women's lives, things change. Maybe their careers or an empty nest or,
Right.
relationships. And I think it all just comes together. It's that perfect storm. It comes together at that point in your lives where it's too
Yeah,
much.
it's a lot. It's a lot to handle. And change is not something the amygdala is fond of in general. Newness in not just the human animal, but in all kinds of animals. The first thing most animals do if you introduce something they've never dealt with before is they're afraid. And the amygdala is all about that. The amygdala's change is not good. We do not like this. And so just knowing that you have a part of you that's kind of programmed to be so reactive to things that are new and different, so programmed that once you understand it, you can be a little more skeptical of it. Part of our problem is we take our feelings too seriously sometimes. We think that what we feel predicts the future. And what we know about the amygdala, it is not predicting the future. It is getting you ready to deal with a potential future. And if it waits, you're going to be in the tiger's mouth before it happens. So it always creates a feeling that there's a danger in anticipation of a danger. So that means we suffer a lot and danger never shows up. We're like, that went well. Well, what was I so worried about? I mean, everything, your wedding, just a picnic you're having. I mean, anything. You can really have such a feeling of dread up to it because of things you're worried about. There's so much suffering that we bring upon ourselves because we trust that feeling. And if we can start to question it and say, I can feel you, amygdala. You don't like this at all. You think this is bad, but I'm pushing right through. And the amygdala can adjust if you push through because people say it's going to get worse and worse, and my fear will go up and up. But actually, the fear is always worse before the situation. That's how we're programmed. And once you get in, have you ever noticed this? Like, let's say you have to give a speech or do a podcast, and you get nervous before it starts, and then as it's starting, suddenly you're in it. And where'd your amygdala go? Your amygdala's like, nothing scary here, nothing bad. And you see it so many times. And now that we understand what the parts of our brain are and what they're doing, we start to realize, yeah, before a situation and when you're uncertain and when you're thinking scary thoughts, you're going to experience a lot of stress. Does that mean things will go badly? No. Does that mean that the things you worry about are going to happen? No. No. And actually, if you think about it, I wish we could tell our amygdala, do you know, you are interfering with my ability to give a good speech. I am trying to give a speech here, and you are making me try to run away. The fight or flight response helps me zero here. Could you just stand down? You are not helping.
I think this will benefit so many women being able to talk about anxiety and being able to understand where it all starts in that little part of the brain, understand the amygdala, change the channel in the cortex, and then stop the worry, make that plan. Is there anything else that you would like to tell a woman who is just getting all worked up?
The last thing I want anyone to do here is blame themselves because you did not know what was going on. We didn't know. When I first got my PhD, we didn't know the amygdala was connected in these specific ways in the human brain. It wasn't until, 2010 that some books started being written. And then I want to tell you, guess who was writing those books? Neuroscientists that no one could read what the heck they were talking about. You couldn't understand them. They're very smart people, but we don't know what they're saying. So we therapists had to see, like, how can we explain this to people in a way? And that's something I've really been passionate about, that I want people to understand the amygdala. And that's why people call me the amygdala whisperer, because I really want people to understand their amygdalas and know you can't always trust it. You can't trust your cortex either. Imagination, we imagine so many things that never happen. But once you start to understand what is going on and you start to know that you have ways you can control it, and it's not by telling yourself, stop being anxious. That doesn't do it. That doesn't do it. But I really want to say, do not blame yourself. Do not be hard on yourself. You didn't know, but try to learn about these processes. Try to learn that there are ways to rewire your brain, this isn't just about doing it once. When you practice this approach to worry, you start to get into the habit of it, and it starts to come more easily, and you start to do it more naturally. And then you have actually made things work different in your brain. Your brain literally starts doing things differently in there. It starts thinking about plans before you would have ever thought about plans, because it knows that's the next thing you're going to want it to think about. So your brain starts anticipating things. Just like when one song stops ending on a certain album, one song ends, you can hear the beginning of the next song before it starts. You know what I'm talking about? Well, if you keep doing things like trying to change your pattern of worrying, if you keep doing things like telling yourself, change the channel, your brain will start to say, I know what's going to come next. We need to change the channel. And it will start anticipating, and literally new pathways are being formed in your brain, and you start doing things differently.
The last part, though, that you just said about the blame, I think it is really a very important message to share, because I think so many of us take that it's our fault, we're doing something wrong.
Well, I'll tell you why. We think it's our fault a lot is that a lot of people look at us and say, there's no reason for you to be upset. There's no reason for you to be so stressed. There's no reason for you to be scared or worried about this situation. But it doesn't tell us how to change it or fix it. And they don't know either. They don't know. And they think that a person can just turn off the amygdala, apparently, but they don't even know what the amygdala is. So basically, they don't know, but they think, I don't get this afraid of riding in a car. So why do you? You don't make sense. You're crazy. We hear this from people. I want to tell you, you may never be able to explain to them about the amygdala and the cortex or whatever. But if you know, it helps you. And I want to say that when you understand it and it helps you live a better life, then you will know you weren't crazy. You were just using the brain you were given. This is the brain we have. It's based on, our ancestors who needed to run and fight, and it creates this defense response. And it feels awful, and it's very real.
That's where I want to end it, because that's the key, is it is
It's
very
very
real.
real. The feelings are real. Even if the danger isn't real, the feelings are real and you're suffering. It is real. And people who tell you snap out of it or, oh God, toughen up or whatever, that doesn't help you know what to do, but there are ways to rewire it.
There are ways. And I think the first way is to read
Oh,
your
there you
book, understand that amygdala, change the channel, and stop the worry. Make your plan, move on, and don't blame yourself. It sounds very simple, but when you're in the midst of all of it, it isn't always that simple.
No, and sometimes you need to have the help of someone who does get it, and it makes sense. But I just want to make everybody an amygdala whisperer. Everybody know how to calm their amygdala down with exercise, with breathing, by getting enough sleep, that REM sleep, 7, 8 hours of sleep. I really want to tell people there's ways you can change this part of your brain once you know it's the source of stress and anxiety.
I have learned so much, and I think whoever watches and listens will get something out of this. Thank
But this
you.
is all the
Thank you
basics
so
you
much.
need. Just basics you need to get there and rewire your brain so you don't produce so much stress and anxiety.
Wow, what an incredible journey this has been. I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to Catherine Pittman for sharing her wisdom, insights, and practical advice with us throughout this series. Catherine, your expertise and compassion have been truly transformative. As we wrap up our series, Menopause and the Anxious Brain, I hope that you're feeling empowered and equipped with the tools you need to break free from the worry cycle and find greater peace. Remember, this is just the beginning of your journey. Keep practicing those strategies, be patient with yourself, and trust in your ability to change your relationship with anxiety. If you found value in this series and want to know more about the science and strategies behind managing anxiety, I highly recommend checking out Catherine's book, Rewire Your Anxious Brain. It's a powerful resource that can help you continue your journey towards inner calm. And of course, if you haven't already, I invite you to join our community at joinempart.com. It's a safe, supportive space where you can connect with women who understand what you're going through, share your experiences, and continue learning and growing together. Thank you so much for being a part of the Menopause Anxiety Project, and stay tuned for more. Remember, you're never alone on this journey. We're here for you every step of the way. Until next time, keep shining your light and know that you have the power to transform your relationship with anxiety.